Hi, and welcome to Race and Ethnicity. This is a single class meeting for TED 232 Educational Psychology at Misericordia University. At our recent in-person class meetings, we've been considering the different types of diversity that K through 12 teachers may experience in their classrooms in Pennsylvania and also throughout other states. We've been considering items such as culture, socioeconomic status, and we recently considered the importance of parental involvement in their children's education. Today, let's consider the topic of race and ethnicity. Now, first off, realize that race and ethnicity are not the same thing. When we talk about ethnicity, we're talking about people who come from a shared sense of identity, in other words, an ethnic group. Now, many times that's due to a common place of origin. Sometimes it has to do with religious affiliation, and sometimes that has to do with race. Now, the term race reflects really only the physical characteristics, and most importantly, the color of a person's skin. So realize that these two terms are utilized, but they are a little different. Realize that the racial composition within the United States is shifting and changing. The proportion of non-whites and Hispanics is consistently growing. The Hispanic and Asian populations have increased dramatically since the 1990s and through the 2000s to our present day. And it's projected that by about 2060, approximately only 45% of the United States population will be non-Hispanic white European American descent, and more than 52% will be Hispanic, African American, or Asian. So by about 2060, the scales are expected to tip in favor of non-white, non-Caucasian people. In this table, which is reproduced from Slavin's textbook, you can see the figures. You can see how the African American population is expected to grow, how the Hispanic population is expected to grow, how the Asian population is expected to grow. Notice that the non-Hispanic white population is actually decreasing and is expected to decrease dramatically by the year 2060. This population shift and makeup of the United States has great implications for the classroom and for how we can reach different students. So let's consider for a moment race, ethnicity, and the school experience. Underrepresented groups such as African Americans, Latino, and Native Americans tend to score lower on virtually every test of academic achievement compared to European and Asian American students. These differences correspond very closely with differences in the groups in socioeconomic status. Not surprising. We considered the impact of socioeconomic status on school achievement. So it's showing once again that there's a correlation there. Now, one difference is since the 1970s, the gap has been slowly decreasing in both reading and math. So what accounts for lower test scores in these underrepresented groups? Well, first of all, economics, poverty, unemployment, underemployment. Families who are unable to provide an enriched environment due to their lower socioeconomic status. Society itself can limit students, and the culture of different groups may limit student performance. In schools where lower socioeconomic status students attend, they typically find overcrowded conditions which unfortunately leads to academically inferior educational experience. And also an inadequate response by schools. Many times instruction that the students receive is inconsistent with their cultural background. Recently, PDE, along with other states, have started to emphasize culturally responsive pedagogy, also known as culturally relevant teaching. This refers to the teaching approach that emphasizes the significance of connecting the culture of students and their social situations with the school's curriculum. Remember that constructivists teach that learning is a personal activity, and content learned has to be meaningful to the individual learner in order to fit in that learner's schema. Another possible barrier to achievement is known as the stereotype threat. And this refers to knowing of a stereotype about a group and then being worried about confirming that stereotype. So this anxiety about possibly confirming it causes an individual student to perform below his or her true abilities. So for example, if someone recognizes a concept that maybe left-handed people are terrible at math, well, that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and a student may be able to achieve higher in math, but they don't. Another example is African American students who are achieving well academically, but some of their peers might accuse them of acting white. And because of that, they may actually not reach their full potential, which is very much within their grasp. Another barrier to achievement from underrepresented groups is segregation. Part of the history, unfortunately, of this country, before 1954, certain groups, African Americans, Latinos, and Native American students, were legally required to attend separate schools in 20 states and the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. In 1954, the Supreme Court enacted desegregation through the court case, the litigation of Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka. So at that point, the idea of segregation went away in this country, and all students could attend the same schools. Now, the overall effect of desegregation on the academic achievement of students from underrepresented groups has been small, although it has definitely been positive. Another important thing that can severely impact students' achievement in the classroom is language differences. According to the United States Department of Education, English learners represent 10% of the total student population in the United States. 10%. According to Patan, there are over 61,000 English learners, and they're speaking more than 200 different languages in Pennsylvania at this time. Now, the most common languages after English are Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, Nepali, and Vietnamese. But these are not the only languages spoken in Pennsylvania. To help you get a better orientation as to how many English learners there are in the state of Pennsylvania, this is a great site you can explore offered by the U.S. Department of Education. And it allows you to, and you notice I've zoomed in on Pennsylvania here, to roll over different school districts. So for example, let me go here to the Hazleton Area School District. Notice that the number of ELs compared to the number of students in that district, there's a large number of students, but there's almost 1,400 ELs. Now, let's move over to Pocono Mountain District. We see 275. And in some cases, you'll see very large amounts. In some cases, like North Pocono, we're seeing 3 ELs. Now we move more in our area. Here's Pittston, Wilkes-Barre, 462. Wyoming Valley West, 42. Lake Lehman, 3. If I can get up to, trying to get up to Dallas. Here's Crestwood, 16. And see if I can, there's Dallas, 6. So you can see there's a wide variety of numbers. Now you might be looking and saying, well, wait, this is from the years 2014 to 2015. Realize that the state and also even further the federal statistics that we're looking at here, it takes several years for those to be processed and to be published. But it gives you a better idea as to what the landscape looks like. Let's consider some terms that are used to refer to students whose primary language is not English in this country. Historically, they've been known as English language learners, or ELLs. In the past year or two, sometimes the second L has been dropped, and these students are referred to as English learners, or ELs. You might also hear these students referred to as language minority, or maybe more appropriately, limited English proficient people, so LEPs. Realize that about 9% of students in our country have not yet achieved enough proficiency in English to succeed in an English-only educational program. So LEP students need to learn English in order to function effectively in United States society and in our classrooms. Considering this, you can determine that bilingual education programs can really boost student achievement. So bilingual education refers to programs that teach students in their primary language while they learn English. There are traditionally 4 types of bilingual education programs in our country. The first is English immersion, and this simply means that the limited English proficiency students are taught primarily or entirely in English, and this is the most common that we find. The second is transitional bilingual education, and this is a situation in which LEP students are taught in their primary language only for the first couple of years, and then they transition over to entire English. We don't have as much of that happening right now. It's declining in popularity. Our third type is paired bilingual education, in which the LEP students are taught in both languages at the same time. The fourth type is a two-way bilingual education, in which teachers teach all students in 2 languages. So the limited English proficient students as well as the English speakers, they all receive education in and instruction in 2 languages. So having considered the research on bilingual education and languages spoken in our state and in our country, and having considered bilingual education, the next question is, what can a teacher do about this? Like, how can we better support English learners? So let's look at a few possibilities. First, don't just say it, show it. In other words, use visuals, use hand gestures. You'll recall that in our course earlier on, we considered the work of Pavio and his research, and he suggested that if you're going to just say something or just show text, it's much more effective to also use visuals. Well, that definitely applies here to people who are learning English. Another thought is use cooperative learning, because when you do so, you can provide safe opportunities for these students who are learning English to use English. Typically, we find that ELs are much more comfortable when they're speaking English in small groups or even when paired with someone else in the classroom. Help students develop their vocabulary. Explicitly teach new terms. Make sure when giving instructions, make sure that they're very clear, because English learners may know the answers, but they may not understand exactly what to do and how to express it according to your instructions. So be sure that all learners understand your instructions. Another positive practice is during instruction, point out what we call cognates. Cognates are words that are similar in both languages. Realize that about 30 to 40% of all words in English have a similar related word in Spanish. Now, when we look at languages such as Chinese, unfortunately, Chinese and English share few cognates. Let's look at a couple of examples. The word family in English looks very similar to the word for family in Spanish. The word center in English is very similar to the word for center in Spanish. So when you are assisting learners, when you are teaching, point out these cognates. In addition to pointing out cognates, it's also important to point out false cognates, or words that look and sound the same, but they have completely different meanings in both languages. For example, in Spanish, the word that looks like pie means foot, while pie in English means a dessert that you can eat. In English, the word embarrassed means feeling ashamed, but in Spanish, a very similar looking word means something entirely different. A few final thoughts about good practice with English learners. You know that when people are learning the language, they're going to make some mistakes. So never publicly embarrass children by correcting their English. You can praise the correct response, and then simply restate the word correctly. For struggling readers, provide small group interventions, because we know that research suggests that small group activities, whether they're tutorials or working together in any collaborative way, tend to be beneficial and effective and satisfying ways for these learners to learn and to fit in to the group. And finally, we've talked already about encouraging families, parental involvement. Encourage parents to be involved in their child's academics. It makes a huge difference. In today's class, we considered race and ethnicity, barriers to academic achievement for underrepresented groups, and we culminated with language differences and how teachers might better support English language learners. To wrap up and process today's content, conduct an online search to locate several strategies as to how a teacher might better support English learners, and post them to an online forum that I will share with you. Thank you for your kind attention. Hope you enjoyed today's activities, and we look forward to seeing you in class soon.